Welcome to Hospitality Talks. My name is sam-erik, and next to me is Abid Butt, who is the co-host of this wonderful show, Hospitality Talks. Hello, Abid. How are you doing?
Very well, Sam. Thank you. And you?
I'm great, and I'm very happy that we have a very timely, important topic, and we have some great guests that you have kindly been able to put together, that we can get together during the same time. So if it's all right, I will bring everybody here. You can introduce who we're going to have a discussion with.
Absolutely. I think this topic, Sam, is very, very appropriate, particularly under the current circumstances. The pandemic has hit just about all industries, but the industry that is near and dear to all of our hearts, travel and tourism and hospitality, has been terribly badly hurt. And until such time that the consumer confidence can be gained, we will continue to lag. Now, the good thing is, in the last week or so, there has been several very positive things that have come up from the big pharmas relative to vaccines and the efficacy of these vaccines. So hopefully that would build the confidence, but we still have long ways to go. I am absolutely thrilled to have our panelists with us, true professionals in the hospitality industry with long, stellar careers dealing with human capital specifically. So we have Iñigo Capell, who is the global chief resource officer for Radisson Hotel Group. We also have joining us Fernando Córdova, who is the chief people officer with the NH Hotel Group. And last but certainly not least, Chris Mumford, who is founder of the Cervus Leadership Consulting. I think our viewers will gain a lot out of these discussions as we share some of the best practices that each and every one of these organizations have deployed and how they're dealing with the human capital side of our business. So, Sam, if it's okay, let me start with Iñigo first. Iñigo, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thank you, Abid. Thank you, Sam. And I'm very happy to be able to join these talks. And thank you for the invitation. And joining Fernando and Chris, whom I know many years ago and are both good friends.
Fabulous. Thanks for taking the time. Iñigo, if it's okay, we'll get straight into it because, as I mentioned, it's a very broad topic. So without any further ado, if I may ask you, what has been your priorities these days? Pre-COVID, but leading into COVID, what is your time spent on these days?
Okay, I will bring a short answer, but I think that the entire industry, pre-COVID, we were in one of the best moments ever. I think EBITDA was booming, everyone was growing, and we're in a great moment. And suddenly, in the month of February, March, everything stopped, and we had to reinvent ourselves and see how to manage the three priorities that we've had. And I'm pretty sure Fernando, when he shares his priorities, are going to be pretty similar. In our case, have been first safety of our employees and the people that work at Radisson and of all our guests. Therefore, the first thing we did was we launched alliance with SGS, and we redefined the entire experience to make sure we were able to tackle all the risk factors to make sure that safety, we could take control of safety of employees and guests. Secondly, engagement. When this happened, we had to start furloughs everywhere. There was no revenues, and we had to adapt to the situation. And therefore, we immediately started with engagement plans that allowed us to, during the pandemic and during these difficult moments, not to lose contact with our employees and to keep engagement as good as possible in difficult situations. And last, obviously, we need to adapt. We had to adapt. We had to I think we're a very resilient company, and we had to adapt to several months with no revenues, okay, and to the following months with very little revenue. So this has been the three priorities, and I have to say in this order: first, safety; second, engagement of our staff; and third, resilience and adapting to the situation.
Superb. Look, our industry, as we all know, more than possibly other industry, it's all about talent. It's all about people that work in our industry, whether it is the person that checks you in or the person that cleans your room to the person that might deliver coffee to you, and also the support team. The main focus has always been in human capital. Tell us a little bit about, now you went through lots of changes pre-COVID because major organizations were coming together. You were developing a new culture. Tell us how that has been. And now that we are dealing with COVID, how has this pandemic helped or hurt that development?
Okay, in 2017, we started a transformation process of the company, a 5-year plan, 25 initiatives, and we shake the company and basically we tackled all the different elements of the value in a company, from the systems, the brands, commercial, organization, okay? And out of this, I think that the pipeline of development was better than ever. We had new systems in place. I mean, in a great situation, as I previously said. Out of this, we found that when we faced, when we started, when COVID started, from the beginning, our shareholders insisted a lot on the need to protect talent. And we realized that out of this, we had to put several people on furlough as the entire industry, but at the same time, we have experienced turnover because both in pure hospitality roles and also in other roles, not pure hospitality, that have moved to other industries. But the reality is that out of the pandemic, the best talent always has opportunity, and we've lost some employees that we hope at some time could come back with us.
Iñigo, has there been generational differences in talent acquisition? The younger generation has different needs than possibly the baby boomers did. Are you dealing with the organization in any different way, even prior to this pandemic hitting us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first we need to differentiate pure hospitality roles to other roles, working on marketing, on finance, on HR, and technology. It's true that the new generations, you cannot talk about career in a company. That's an old concept. And we don't talk about career, okay? You have to have the best opportunity at that time and the best job for them at that time. And of course, I think the hospitality industry, the good thing about this industry is that you can offer international career. It's an extremely diverse environment. And then we sell a product that everybody likes because everybody loves hotels. But the reality is that there's a huge difference. I mean, all the new generations, their main focus is what's the best job for them at this time. Okay, and if you're not the best choice for them at this time, they will definitely look for another job. And there's a huge difference.
Well, just to share a small story, my time dealing with trainees as we were developing the future leaders of the organization, I used to visit with the trainees very consistently, sit with them as to how they were enjoying it. And during one conversation, a young person that was working with us, I asked him if he would like to be a general manager someday. This young man looks me straight in the eye and tells me, look, I wouldn't do what you do even if you paid me a couple of $1 million, because your life is all about the hotel. This is not the life that I desire. How does the industry adapt to that? How do we create this work-life balance, particularly attracting the younger talent?
We are now doing persona profiles because there's not one solution that fits everybody. Okay, and it's true. The pure traditional hospitality career, where you become a GM in the US, you start as a GM in the US or Europe, and suddenly you move to Asia, you move to Africa, you move to Latin America, and then you start jumping from country to another. You make good money because compensation in this industry is competitive. For many young generations, it's not the career they want, okay, because they give much more, because these kind of jobs are extremely tough. I mean, moving every 4 or 5 years to a new country with your family and starting again, it's a tough job. You need to like it. But it's true that within this profession, there are many people that love it. So I think that we need to adapt, and we need to have different profiles for different jobs. We have profiles for mature markets where the career progression is within the same country or even within the same city. And then you have career plans for those that are open and for those that working abroad. and having this mobility is something extremely positive. So not one receipt for all, but having different profiles or different persona profiles adapting to different needs.
Fabulous, fabulous, Iñigo. And I'll turn it over to Sam here in a little bit, but just before I do that, look, the talent acquisition is a huge issue. We need to find the best, and then we need to be able to retain them. Our industry is notorious for high turnover, where people move on to bigger and better things, and in some ways that is very gratifying that you have developed people and they can assume bigger roles. But we also need to develop the bench strength. At the same time, the demands of the business are that we optimize our organizations, that we look after the labor cost, because that is the single largest expense items on our income statements. How do we manage the two? How do we develop the future leaders of the organization, but yet look after the optimization at the same time?
Yeah, I think one priority is first knowing, giving a number behind your needs. Okay, you first need to know what you need. Okay, and their needs are going to be probably very different. You will have probably needs on this kind of profiles for these countries, and in this industry, it's very easy to know this. You know the pipeline of hotels you're going to open, you know the turnover you're having, and you can easily plan what I will need in the coming 3 years. Okay, then you need to have strong talent plans to know who are your talents, okay, and how to develop your talents, okay, and this bench strength, how to look at the people you have in-house, how to identify all this. And at the same time, you need to know your competitors, and you need to know who are the best among your competitors. And there, you have to be extremely creative with many different programs to attract them to your company. And this is something we've been doing at Radisson, and we feel extremely proud. And then you have the talent attraction for other kind of profiles, where time to market is extremely important. I mean, from the moment you place the ad until you place the offer, cannot take more than 4 or 5 days. And here, technology is crucial. We have invested heavily on this, and I think we have amazing platforms that provide us, that brings out these possibilities.
I think that's a great segue, if I may ask. I know you look after the technology portfolio within your organization as well, but specifically to human capital, what kind of technologies have been deployed? How has that helped you engage with your teams, particularly during COVID, when all of us are working remotely?
Yeah, you know, when we started the 5-year plan, one of the initiatives was transforming HR. And we set up a target that by 2022, 85% of HR processes would be digitalized. Today, we have 92%, okay? And we were able to do this investing heavily in technology. We have a core system, and that is Workday. I think it's an amazing system. And then we have ancillary systems that have been the best in class we've found in the industry. We have an amazing technology for recruitment called Harry that allows us this in 5-6 days. We make the offer until the candidate has signed the contract. We do all digital. We have brought video interviews. We have brought video job descriptions, okay, that makes things much more easy. From the communications perspective, we have launched very nice technologies, a kind of Instagram to allow communication. On the learning perspective, I think out of COVID, one of the best things is that we have multiplied by 7 the use of our learning platforms, okay? And we have like 3 academies: Radisson Live, Radisson Online, and Radisson on the Job. Radisson Live, the traditional trainings on a room, have shifted to Radisson Online, okay? And effectiveness of these trainings during the COVID has been 4.9 over 5, okay? So I think that this crisis of COVID has accelerated a transformation, a digital transformation. Most of us had envisioned to take 5-6 years, have taken 4 or 5 months, okay? And now people feel extremely comfortable having a training online, and we can do the same.
Well, I guess this particular session is a proof of technological adoption, because pre-COVID, we might not have taken the time to bring these kinds of conversations to a lot more people than having to travel to a destination. So Thank you for that insight. Let me hand it over to Sam for a bit, and I'll be back with you in a moment. Sam, you're muted.
Well, it's always the host who is muted, but well, let me ask again, how has your organization evolved, particularly during the post-COVID? What are the changes you have seen in the organizational changes?
I mean, obviously, from a pure business and organization, we have to become much more agile, a much more linear organization, much more flexible, and with much more functional mobility, because we have less resources to do more things. Okay, so that's a characteristic of I think all my peers. Okay, I think in our case we had invested heavily on technology, and we had an operational model that we believe is extremely solid. Okay, and this in this kind of crisis allowed us to react very quickly and really well. There's something very specific of this crisis that I think affects many companies, but whenever I speak with my colleagues, many share this, is that this crisis has made management much more human. Okay, and in our case, our CEO, for instance, is extremely human. But when all this started, he directly has been calling each employee in the company, and we have close to 100,000 collaborators that has gone through COVID individually, wherever they were. Okay, when we went through the furlough process, our CEO has called individually all employees on central functions that had gone through the furlough process. Okay, to give the support, to explain the situation, and this is an example, and we didn't do this before. Okay, so I think, and I have plenty of other examples. So I think one of the very positive things of this crisis is that management has become much more human. And I think this is not only Radisson. I'm sure when Fernando shares his experience and other things, it's across industries and across the world.
That's very interesting. Thank you. Now, of course, during this time and during the pandemic and so on, I'm sure it has an impact on the mental and physical health and so on. Can you share just sort of what are the things you are doing to support the team during this difficult period? Because I'm sure, being myself been in hotel operation, but we had our different cases that happened during the SARS and tsunamis, where we lost a lot of business. We have to do a lot of also evolving in our organization. It had put a lot of stress on everyone. But I'm interested to know how you as an organization are dealing with that, to provide that support to the team.
Okay, I think there are different dimensions on this. Okay, I think that our industry is I think located in multiple sites all over the world. Okay, and when this crisis took place, we had to accelerate many things that were already there. But in our case, for instance, we created, and when people had to start working from home, this has changed a lot our day-to-day. So we have introduced many routines like virtual coffees with leaders, learning vitamins to strengthen the learning culture, Radisson talks like this of many different topics to try to keep all our team involved in the company with things that go beyond their day-to-day of the responsibilities of the work they have to do in their departments. Okay, we have also introduced other activities like something we call Radisson Conversations, where we bring inspiring leaders to talk about different topics that have nothing to do with the business but are inspiring. Something that is called Radisson Travels, that it's explanation and we present different destinations all over the world. Okay, so basically we've been trying to introduce content or elements into the day-to-day of our teams in order to help them in these difficult moments where the job has changed. You work 9-10 hours per day from home, and this is extremely challenging.
Very good. Another question is now, because of the you have different generations of people working, whether it's millennials and maybe there's some boomers still in the workforce. How do you treat them, and how are they dealing with this situation? What are the differences in the generation from your point of view?
Yeah, I told a bit before. I think there's a huge difference. Okay, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you could talk about career in a company. I think career is an old concept now. I think you are the best choice for everybody and every moment. Okay, so and then you need to have. I think the good thing about these profiles, and I really some people of my generation, when we look at them, say, hey, when we had their age, we did anything to get a job. We worked 14 hours per day, and they come, no, you need to have the best choice. And I think this is great. This for companies is great because you need, as a company, to be the best choice for them.
Yeah.
You need to offer an extremely competitive salary. You have to train them. You have to offer them challenging job where they can grow and they can learn, and a very nice environment. And leadership and other things are crucial. And if you don't meet all, don't doubt they will leave and they will find another option. So I think this is something great.
Thank you. Let me now hand over to Abid to continue with a few more questions.
Thank you, Iñigo. Iñigo, have you seen any changes in needs and demands of the team as they are dealing with this pandemic, and how have you been able to support that from home office?
I think the first basic need is technology. Okay, I think that out of this crisis, there are some companies that are making a lot of money. Definitely Microsoft, Zoom, all these companies, but companies need to have very strong platforms to enable communication. Okay, so in our case, we had invested heavily, and I think that this is a big change. You need to have the best setup. Okay, then we have dedicated a lot of time to train our teams on how to work from home. Actually, the first Radisson talk we did at Radisson, I prepared it and I shared my experience on what I did. I wake up early, I did some exercise, how often I get up off my table and move, and we gave very specific and practical examples on how to manage a full day working from the office. Okay, and we regularly on the weekly learning vitamins that we share with all our staff, we always share new tips and tricks on how to improve working from home.
And one last question, Iñigo, and we'll bring in our next guest at this particular point. Using technology, using the digitized version of managing people remotely, how have you been able to transfer culture? It's a lot easier to have a cup of coffee with somebody, sit across from somebody, because as human beings, we are social creatures. All of a sudden, we having to talk to somebody through the camera now. We're dependent on technology where I might be muted. How have you been able to impart the culture, and what challenges have you seen in that process?
I think that first, culture is something that is not static, it's evolving, okay? And we were in a process of culture transformation. From a culture perspective, I think that this crisis has brought many extremely positive elements. As I said before, management is much more human and much more closer. Secondly, we're evolving the culture to a culture of trust. Okay, people work from home and people can do whatever they want. Nobody's looking at them, but people deliver, and people deliver more than before. I think all these elements are allowing companies, and I'm in different groups with different HR leaders. Everybody's talking now about hybrid working and other concepts than 1 year ago, you could only find in few companies. And I believe that now 70-80% of the companies are considering these kind of models because this crisis has proved that the hybrid work is a solution that works. And basically it means moving from a culture of I don't want to use the word control, but to a culture of trust, where people decide where to be and what to do and organize themselves. Okay, and I think this is something very positive out of this, the human element of this crisis, and secondly the trust element that this crisis has brought.
I think that is a critical point you bring up, Iñigo. As a matter of fact, just a couple of days ago, I was reading one of the studies that McKinsey, I believe, had recently published. And the single most important thing that came out of there from a workforce point of view is how well they are entrusted. all of us have been comfortable with bringing people into the office, whether I came into the office and played solitaire on my computer all day or not, but we felt comfortable having everybody around. Workforce is changing, even though telecommuting had been talked about for the longest time, but telecommuting was as long as I was on the phone for my office. So it's evolved, and it's fabulous that you've been able to adapt that, and you've been ahead of the curve relative to putting that. Please stay with us. We'll have you back in a moment. At this particular point, I'm going to bring in our next guest, Fernando Córdova, who is Chief People Officer with NH Hotel Group. Fernando, welcome to Hospitality Talks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Abby, and thank you very much, Sam, for the invitation. And it's a pleasure also to share with Chris, who I had the chance to talk yesterday, and with Iñigo. That Iñigo actually was my former boss when we were together in NH. He was the one who hired me here. So then I'm very pleased, and I have learned a lot from him.
Oh, fantastic. You bring up a great point. As large as our industry is, it is still a very small group. It's a very small group of people that work in this industry. So let me pose this question to you. We talked a little bit about generational differences. What kind of people are attracted to this industry? Is it only the crazies that survive and the sane leave soon? What kind of people are attracted to this industry, generally speaking?
Generally speaking, I would say, because for me, as you can imagine, from my background, actually, I'm Mexican. I have been living in the Netherlands, and I have been working in Spain. And actually, most of my background has been on the finance world. And then I joined the hospitality sector almost 7 years ago. So when I joined and I met the people working for NH, it was marvelous for me to discover. I would say that one of the factors that really makes the difference there, and that you can feel precisely there, is the passion that you have for the business, the passion you have for the service and the nature of the business itself on hospitality. So that's something that really, when you have it, it really makes a difference. What it really makes a difference here is also that it demands you have to move quickly. It's a lot of things that it demands, that you have to really react quickly on that, a number of things. Challenges keep moving fast. Yeah, it's really challenging to do there. So being a challenger is an aspect that it's important. You really have to love challenge to join here. Do you really want to make to have the possibility to have your own print here? So that to build together with the team, to be part of it, to be a great collaborator, I would say. And that means that you should be someone who has this passion also for people, to be 100 people there. Actually, when we define our own employer branding and our strategy and plan, and we define which should be that is our own identity, which actually we defined as that the values were challenging, 100% people and passion. We were really talking about what we were telling, that it would mean that we nurture passions to really take them further, that we brought into the claim further together, that I think that summarizes what the people that that we were searching for, that could join the company or that could join hospitality sector are searching for.
I think that is very important. I remember a few years ago, I was back at my alma mater speaking to the students, and one of the students asked me, well, what is your typical day like? And my response to that was, I don't know what typical means in this business. There isn't a day that is like any other. Every day is a new day. You're dealing with different things. The priorities change. But that's what makes this industry so dynamic and so enriching. You get a chance to work around the globe and deal with people from all over the world. And it is the most enriching industry, in my opinion. Not that I'm biased, just because I've spent all my career in it, but it is the most enriching industry. So tell us a little bit about the organizational culture and how that has been impacted with COVID. What was NH working on pre-COVID days, and how has that evolved, Fernando?
Yeah, all I would say, and it's connected to what I was answering firstly, because I would say to start, as a headline, actually the essence of the culture in terms of the values, the essence itself hasn't changed. We just adapted it to the priorities under the changing unprecedented times, because at the end we stay true to our values, because in the best or in the worst scenario, you had to be coherent, you had to be consistent. It increases your credibility, and as Iñigo also mentioned, what that important aspect of trust towards your team members, and makes you stronger as a company. But if I think, for instance, 2 years ago, in the pre-COVID times, and I'm telling you about 2 years ago because precisely 2 years ago, a couple of important things were happening here, because 2 years ago we were acquired by Minor International, and we were getting to know each other. And 2 years ago, actually, we were defining the new strategy of the company, because we were working on the new 5-year plan, and therefore we were working on the new people strategy. That actually, when we revisited the strategy itself with the whole cultural component, as you know, you had to revisit the trends. You had to see what things that you have sown and you are building, what the business really thinks is working, and what has to be done. So at the end, we came to the conclusion that the foundations were strong, but we needed to consolidate. And by that time, we had completed a number of important initiatives related to culture. We had the NH leadership model in place, connected with the different processes and the itinerary of leadership, elevating the leadership development into the key elements that were specified for leadership, because you needed to be important to be a leader that was very clear self-aware, very clear self-control, very clear self-develop, in order to become effective on the second leg, on motivating, on developing people, and on coaching and giving feedback. So that linked to the talent management culture that we have been consolidating, the engagement surveys that are in standard in the corporate, in the group already, the employer branding campaign, and the employer branding approach to the identity and values that I told you. I would say that at the end, this is there. It's just that when it comes to a situation where, from the Maslow pyramid, when you see it not only from the employees, but also you see it from the customers, you had to go down, because then the focus is very much into the psychological step, the safety step, the love and belonging step. You have to not to abandon the strategy, because it still is applicable, but you have to refocus it. Yeah. So then we keep the essence, and it's there. So it's just we have to be consistent, but then we refocus to 3 main labors, that are linked to the strategy completely, are part of it. But we needed to focus on caring, on connecting, and of course, as business partners, to focus on what the business was really demanding in that moment and what we needed to do for that. Those were the 3 main labors from the whole HR aspect and team we needed to focus.
Fabulous, fabulous. You brought up a point about engagement surveys, Fernando. Talk a little bit more about that. And there are differing opinions whether they work or they don't work. What would you say to a naysayer that says, hey, look, this is just something that organizations do and really doesn't have any value to them? Nobody ever follows up on them. Same questions come up every year, but nothing changes. What would you say to somebody like that?
Well, if it's useful or not, it depends on how seriously it's taken by the leadership of the organization, starting by the management committee, how seriously they are committed to it, to support it, to launch it, to review the results, to analyze it, and to commit to the action plan that has to take place, because it starts from there. Actually, it starts from the management to really be role models on it. So the big difference is there. At the end, we have been working with engagement surveys, actually, from the time I started working with Iñigo in 2014, and we do it biannually, basically. And then the situation is basically that when we launch it, and we have been making it, we have learned a lot from the previous ones, not only from the action plans, I mean also from the whole process, how it takes place, to make it even much more enrichful, for the whole process itself. So from there, we have really professionalized a lot the reports, the analysis, to make it easier for the team members, for the leaders to understand it, to facilitate the dialogue from the results, and to be much more precise in terms of the action plans that we had to work with. And then from there is how we build it and work on it. And then we experienced the last time also a pulse survey in the middle to check how we were doing, also to have a sort of a pulse on how we were doing. So from my point of view, it's really something that it doesn't matter if it's on the worst times, in the best times. When it works, you can stop. you had to measure engagement whenever it is, for the good and the bad times itself.
I totally agree. And at times when chips are down, when things are bad, we tend to let go of some of these initiatives, which I think might be regressive as opposed to staying true to the culture of the organization. Fernando, you talked about three things that mainly three pivotal elements that you've been involved in. Talk a little bit about your focus on connection and communication. I know you have several programs that you have launched, but give us highlights of some of the things that have been really successful. And I will turn it over to Sam after this, but if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the best practices on connection and communication.
Sure. Actually, if I might, since this is quite exciting, I would also like to add also what we're doing also in terms of the caring part. So, but starting on what you're telling me on the connection and the communication piece, basically the challenge we were facing there is to focus especially those efforts on clear communication. We had very clear, and most of the companies had it very clear. I'm very connected to what Iñigo has also mentioned, but we need to focus the efforts on clear communication, and we were remotely working to keep our people on timely basis informed, the active listening much better than ever, the proximity despite distance, to manage the emotions and collaborating across with other colleagues through distance and the departments remotely. So basically what we did when this started in March, the second week of March, we created and dedicated a newsletter, a new channel, actually called internal the COVID-19 channel. And it was aimed to unify the global communication regarding the coronavirus crisis, and where we were communicating on a regular basis as requested. It could happen every day or every week or every 3 days, depending on the news, because things were changing very quickly. So we were communicating of course, first, what it was the most important part, the health and safety protocols at hotels and central services, the special recommendations for team members that were part of the groups at risk, the updates on hotels closing, the commercial aspects such as the cancellation policy. This channel was alert through these first critical months. It's not active anymore because it had a live for a number of months. And then next to that channel, we also launched, supported by this channel, the videos to all employees to inform by the CEO or by management committee members or by some of the managing directors in the business units. Through the video, we were having these videos to inform about the operations and the business continuity measures. So these were done on timely basis by homemade by the CEO and supported by the marketing and the internal communication team to reach out all the employees. It didn't matter if the people were suspended or work time working or so whatever. Everybody could reach it to make them feel as close as possible. That was the most important part. To inform them about every step the company was taking and on the coronavirus, and to report about the status of the business and the situation. And of course, we keep working, and as we have always done, to have the quarterly results town halls that instead of being presential and streamlined, we needed to do it only in streamline. So we continued with that to inform on the current situation. And what I would highlight on this connect and communication labor, it's that I think is one of the most things I think we could be proud of, is that in terms of leadership, for the leaders' roles, for the connection aspect, we supported our leaders to manage communications and feel self-confident and prepared to do it, aligned with the clear messages to be transmitted for the whole processes, for furloughs and temporary layoffs, to feel self-confident to transmit the right messages, to have all the information, to train them on that, to prepare the corresponding conversation to transmit to each one of their employees with a clear timeline, with clear instructions, so that we will do it with the same messages and support with conference calls, I told you, and emails to comprehend all the details. So basically, that's an aspect I would highlight on the communication piece.
Communication is critical in any at any time, but particularly dealing with the crisis as debilitating as this pandemic has been. Communication becomes absolutely front and center. So thank you for sharing that best practice. Let me turn it over to Sam for a bit, and I'll be back with you in a moment. Sam, over to you.
Sure. Thank you. So thank you very much. You mentioned that NH hotels have been taken over by Minor Group. I know Minor Group, of course, from Thailand. I've been working with Thailand for many years. So if you can share some aspects of the culture that is now that you have been incorporating, or maybe some elements of the Thai culture that you be see in NH hotels.
Well, here it's interesting because when we were acquired by Minor and we got to know each other, we connected across on the different disciplines with our counterparts. Basically, what we learned from the beginning is there were some common territories. Actually, when we're talking about the culture and what they call the drive culture and the essence behind the drive culture or their own employer branding campaign, there are a number of things that are similar in terms of this passion and this love for challenge and development. It is there. But it's also true that it's more a complementary business. As you might know already, Minor International basically has three lines: the food side for all the thousands of restaurants, the lifestyle brands for the stores, and then Minor hotels. And then from that perspective, from the Minor hotels and the segments they had and the countries where they were present, when they acquired NH, basically was like a marriage, because it was like, well, a good marriage, because basically we were present in the geographies where they were not mainly present, and the opposite. And the same thing with the brands and the segments of the brands. Basically, the brands would complement each other in most of the cases. So it basically, when we revisited the models, we realized that the models were quite different from the operational point of view. I mean, the model in Minor hotels is very, very decentralized, and our model is very, very centralized. Through years, actually, we have been working to make it much more efficient by bringing the back office to the central services from the hotels and keeping there the front. And also in the last years, we have been working on the operating model to make the operation much more efficient, where actually the operations department and HR together have been leading that initiative for years. So that's what it has actually helped us to endorse the quick and opening and closing of hotels, because it's quite efficient now to do it in that sense. So with Minor at the end, what we realized was like, well, let's explore which synergies we could have and what's common, but still we are not going to change the models, because the models work, such as are defined in every country. Actually, when we open a Minor hotels brand in the territories of Europe and America, where NH Hotel Group is leading, we do it in the structural way from the organizational point of view for an NH, but with the branding and quality experience from the brand of that Anantara or Avani or whatever brand. So that's what we do. So we found which synergies we could have, what we could share, all these best practices. There are processes that we implemented here or there that we are sharing, but each one is leading, yeah, because the models are, in that sense, are different. And therefore, the profile of a GM in NH is different than the profile of a GM in Minor hotels that is responsible for the whole business of the hotel. And in NH, it's not completely responsible for those business, because it's not responsible for the back.
Okay, thank you for that input. I'm interested now in sort of the leadership characteristics that have been successful during the pandemic, and if you want to share some anecdote or just a general, what have you seen from your point of view, the kind of characteristic that is working best during this particular time?
Yeah, I would say this has been quite important in a sense that one of the labors that I mentioned before, that was the caring part. There we developed, one of the tools we developed was something we call With You, that I'm not going to spend time to answer to you here. But next to that, we were supporting the leaders to manage meaningful conversations, to have a clue how important it was to have a leadership conversation. And that helped us to identify what was really working out in terms of the attributes that were becoming successful during the pandemic. Yeah. So basically, when we analyze it and you see it from the perspective of learnings from the employee, or as an individual, or as a team, or as an organization, as an individual, you will realize that there was a learning about better self-awareness, or the importance of wellness and the work-life balance and the technology as a facilitator to work remotely. As a team, the empathy about others' work life, the quality of the teamwork, as an organization, the importance of communication, the importance of becoming much more collaborative and less silos. So in the speed versus the bureaucracy, all these kind of aspects. But at the end, the leadership attributes I have to rescue from these pandemic times are the effective and consistent communication, communicating thoroughly, getting across the messages, showing closeness and empathy. Then what also has been mentioned by Iñigo, the adaptability, the resilience, the flexibility, and the ability to manage change that drives that you can stand up easily and navigate and manage change with such a fast moving. To become cultural sensitive and more emotional, because now, as you can imagine with 30 countries, and in the biggest countries dealing with the 4 laws and all the government's legislations and this and that, and what was happening in terms of the connection of the emotions with the local cultures. So we became more sensitive as leaders and emotional with very complex work environments in that sense for different countries. And to keep caring for inspiration, recognition, and caring for the people. And I would say that something that was very interesting for us to learn from the leadership attributes here is when you bring it to the talent perspective, because we have 4 drivers, potential drivers from talent. That's curiosity, insight, determination, and engagement. And as you can imagine, in these times, it was precisely determination and engagement that were playing in a higher level. And a big number of the leaders, we were getting out of our comfort zone. We're dealing with new aspects or different perspectives and situations. So there we could realize who were really being able to deal with it and face it to successfully, who needed help and who couldn't manage well. So that was also has been really quite interesting, seeing not only for the leadership attributes, but also from the talented ones from the leadership attributes connected with the potential drivers.
Excellent, thank you. I have many more questions, and we have questions from our viewers also, but I will leave that towards the end of the show. So, well, over to you, Abid, now. A few more questions for him.
Thank you, Sam and Fernando. Fernando, just one quick thing, and if you can give us a couple of bullets before I bring our next guest into the discussion. Do you think that the skills needed for our leadership teams would change in any way as we come out of this pandemic?
I think we have to leverage from the learnings. So we shouldn't change how far we have gone in terms of the communication and the adaptability. I wouldn't change that. I think we have to keep it as strong as we have brought it. And probably one that I would bring here to something we have to be much more prepared to is to be prepared to deal and lead with a more technical driven world as a leader.
Fabulous. Thank you for all the insights, Fernando. Please stay with us. We'll have you back in a moment.
Sure.
But at this particular point, I'm going to bring in our next guest, Chris Mumford, who's the founder of Cervus Leadership Consulting. Chris, welcome to Hospitality Talks. I think you muted as well. Nope, still muted. Wow, we were okay earlier, but we can't hear you at all at this point. Geez, any thoughts there, Chris? Because oh, there you are.
Yeah, you got me?
Yep. You're back in. Awesome.
Okay. Apologies for that.
Well, thank you for that scare to start with.
Keep it lively.
And you know, this is the beauty of it. We might have been reticent to having things like this occurred, but during the pandemic, to be honest, this is very well accepted. Also, during the conversations, your dog might have come up and sat in your lap, and that's acceptable, or your kid might show up and that's acceptable. What has not been acceptable is when people are carrying on these conversations without their pants on, and that has even happened. I guess that has put them in difficult predicaments. But Thank you for joining us, Chris. Let's talk a little bit about the evolution of HR function. Now, you've been involved in placing leaders in a lot of organizations around the globe. Talk to us about how this function has evolved. We've gone through title changes and what people are focused on. Is HR really becoming a regulatory arm of the organization, or is it something different?
Yeah, thanks, David. And I do have my pants on, just to reassure you. Listen, I think HR is evolving. It's gone through, as you say, iterations. It was personnel, human resources, human capital, talent, people. Call it what you will. At the end of the day, it's about the people of our businesses. I think the way I see it now is, HR has certainly over the last decade or so managed to get a much louder voice at the boardroom table. And if you look at your chief HR officer now within an organization, that person is a true strategic partner to the CEO. Kind of cascade down from that, and it kind of splits into a couple of areas as I see it. I mean, one, to your point, you have the regulatory compliance issues, you have the legal, you have payroll, you have employee law, and these fairly administrative type functions, as well as hiring and training and so forth. But then I think what we've seen come into the sphere of HR is these more strategic initiatives and areas of responsibility. Whether that, like Fernando's been talking about, employee engagement, it's culture, it's communications, it's progressing the diversity and inclusion agenda, and these more, as I say, strategic issues, and making sure that the leaders within the business are fully involved in that. And I think that's the other area that I've seen change around the human capital agenda, is its adoption, the adoption of the people piece within the broader organization. I think it used to be back in the day a little bit, oh, that's a people issue, go talk to personnel. Nowadays, I think departmental heads, functional leaders have a lot more direct responsibility and involvement in the human capital of their teams and areas of the business directly, than relying solely on another department to take care of that. So I think that's how it's evolved, and there's a lot of talk about, obviously, people always refer to people being the most important asset of our industry. So it's great to see sessions like this, because I still don't think there's enough of them. There's a lot of seminars out there about hotel real estate values and occupancy trends, but not a lot about the people side, and it is key. So thanks for putting this together.
Absolutely, and we have talked about it off and on. I personally believe that our industry was very heavily reliant on this. It'll continue to be, and quite candidly, coming out of this pandemic, this piece is going to be ever more important, because not everybody would survive. It's a different time that we are living in, and it'll continue to evolve. I had asked the question earlier, but Chris, I'll ask you, since you've placed many people in different organizations, is it that only the crazies survive in this business? I sometimes ask myself that question, having spent all of my career in the industry. I have loved it, but I do think about why is it that a lot of my colleagues that I knew at the very beginning of my profession that are no longer in the business?
Well, I think you wouldn't be alone if during the course of this year you've questioned your sanity as to why you're in the most impacted industry on the planet. But we've all been there. Listen, I don't think you have to be crazy, but I think you have to certainly have a passion and an interest in it. It is a hugely enriching and rewarding business to be in, full of variety, and can give back in so many ways. But at the end of the day, it is, as Iñigo and Fernando have alluded to, it's a tough game. It's even at the best of times, you're running this, if it's a hotel, and suddenly you can have everything from the kitchen suddenly bursting into flames to the spa therapist hasn't shown up, to maintenance is on the phone with a leak upstairs, to suddenly big booking cancelling. I mean, there's always a lot of irons in the fire, and it really suits, I think, those who like that that kind of living by the seat of their pants almost, and having a lot of balls to juggle. And there's some great project management skills and solution-driven leaders in our business as a result of that. But yeah, I think if you don't enjoy that sort of thing, you're not going to enjoy this business, and those people will fade away. But I think the committed are, they get something from it. They love the buzz. They love the guest kind of focus, the multiple stakeholders to be running with. The complexity of the business is, fascinating. And I think that's what keeps, the likes of us, Savid, still here and still going.
Very well said. Chris, by the way, we having a tiny bit of sound challenges. You breaking up a little bit, but we'll persevere through. It's a little crackling sound, but we'll get through it. Have you seen that the organizations are looking for different attributes in the leaders as you go out and try to find the talent? What kind of people have excelled in the organizations? And truly, is there ever a bad leader, or is it a figment of imagination?
Well, I think a bad leader is not a leader. A bad leader is probably a manager. A manager is someone who likes to exert control, as opposed to a leader who's someone who inspires and supports and guides people. So I'm not sure a bad leader is a leader, full stop. I think, to your point, I think leadership is leadership. I don't think necessarily anything's changing as a result of COVID and the pandemic. I think it is bringing certain, the strengths of leadership into sharp focus. So I think the strengths and weaknesses of leaders are probably more exposed during times like this, where people are under stress and strain. And we're seeing some very, prominent examples of amazing leadership, in the public forum through videos and employee engagement tools that are out there. And you're seeing some leaders that are perhaps they're not bad, but they're struggling with that. They're perhaps not as competent with that. I think, what is being brought into, as I say, sharp relief is this ability of leaders to be agile, to have great flexibility, and to be able to really, take each day as it comes and live with the uncertainty. And that is something that, human beings and a lot of leaders are not necessarily comfortable with. They're used to knowing where they're going. What's the 5-year plan? What's the 1-year plan? And how are we doing? Whereas, the majority of this year has been about what's happening today and how we're going to react today, just to kind of keep in survival mode. So I think it's brought a more immediacy of thinking and decision making to the fore. But I think hospitality, leaders are very well prepared for that. I think, as I said before, it's an industry where you need to be agile and be able to think on your feet, and respond quickly. If you have a complaining guest in front of you, you have to deal with them there and then and come up with a solution. That's kind of our background, our DNA. So, I think we're well placed to deal with it. But, I think what's made a good leader before remains true today and will remain true tomorrow.
Well, you are correct. Our plans, though we might want to have a 5-year plan and our 2-year plan, our plans are being rewritten every day, every hour. And that's dealing with crisis. I guess that is the fundamentals of dealing with crisis. And with visibility as poor as it is, we unfortunately cannot rely on the information because the information continues to evolve. Talk a bit about the recruitment side of things in recruitment in digital age. How has that changed? Is it working better or worse? And what hurdles has that put in front of you? And I'll turn it over to Sam after this question, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about it. How have you seen the technological adoption in recruitment process?
Well, it's sped things up. Is probably the quick answer. The ability to reach people, to gather information, to do research is all so much faster now. I think the ability or the role that digital tools can have in recruitment is really about bringing you to a point where you have a shortlist or a final couple of candidates. So through AI tools now, it's possible to do all of that trawling for the candidates, do the kind of initial matching of keywords on resumes and skill sets and requirements against a job profile, and then bring it to, even put out you were asking earlier about psychometric surveys, get that piece done, and get it to a point where, ultimately, let's say there's 4 candidates for consideration, at which point I still am a firm believer you need the human element to make the final call and to help establish the true fit with an existing team and the cultural fit. But there's no question the technology is evolving fast, and that process that I just talked about can take hours, days, as opposed to the weeks it might have taken previously. So it's enabling a lot faster turnaround times of recruitment and outreach.
You bring up a very good point. Obviously, as a candidate, and a lot of people in this industry has been negatively impacted. The technology has made it possible for employers to have a vast number of different skill sets and applicants available to them. But at the end of the day, quite candidly, in the age of optimization, as we were talking about earlier, nobody really has the time to do that. And that's where we rely on skills like yourself, but also the digital trollers or crawlers are going through hundreds of resumes, and some people might get left out. They might never get a chance to be in front of the people. They might be absolutely the right candidate with the right attributes. What would you advise people that are in the job market today that might never have had to look for a job in the last 10, 15, 20 years?
Well, I think to your point, these tools are going to get smarter and smarter all the time, and the chances of being overlooked through those tools are going to be minimized for a start. And if you are starting out, I would make sure that on your resume, on a LinkedIn profile, you have the relevant keywords so that they are caught and picked up. Aside from that, Abid, I mean, my key recommendation to people in our business, you referenced this earlier, it's a small world. The hospitality is a village, right? And there is nothing to beat networking. And we have a close, tight-knit community within hospitality, which has only grown stronger this year during this pandemic, which has been fantastic to see. But the power of network and reaching out to people and people you've worked with in the past and so forth, and working the network, that is ultimately probably the key way to find something. That's still the deferred option is a recruiter or hiring companies saying, well, who do we know? Who do we know who knows someone, right? That's kind of how most people end up in a new role. It's through friends of friends, referral, etc., etc. The number of roles that recruiters actually fill is quite small in the grand scheme of things. So I would, you've got to have your LinkedIn up to date. You've got to have your documents squared away, and then you've got to be out talking. It's never wasted time to pick up the phone to someone you've worked with in the past or had interactions with, and you just don't know where it may lead.
Fabulous. Chris, let me turn it over to Sam here in a little bit, and I will be back with you. Thank you for the insights. Sam, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, Chris, now with the recruitment process, I mean, traditionally it was sending out resumes and you may have a phone interview, and now with the digital era, of course, a lot of that is handled through video interviews. How far do you look at before you actually meet the person in face-to-face, and at what point do you make that decision to meet them? Or are actually decisions being made based on resumes and then that impression that they leave over a video which is held over a Zoom or a Teams?
Well, Sam, I can tell you from experience this year that people are becoming rapidly more comfortable with making hiring decisions based purely on video. I mean, I've had cases where clients have sat, including myself, we've been in 3 or 4 different locations in different time zones and parts of the world, and the entire process has been conducted through video, to the point where the client or the hiring organization has done a GoPro video of the environment of the office, to show the candidate this is what it's like here. I mean, there's some really clever and innovative things you can do now. So obviously the preferred option is always going to be face-to-face, probably with the final 2 candidates. Up until that point, video is going to, I think, win out. But I do think that particularly if you look at a lot of hiring in the hospitality sector, it does involve relocation, particularly at a senior executive level. And, you're not going to be flying in 3 or 4 candidates from, wherever in the world for final rounds of interviews now. I think people are going to do more and more of that on video, and really maybe just bring the final 1, as I say, 2 candidates in for that face-to-face kind of final seal of approval in the recruitment process. But we've come a long way in a short period of time with the video, and everyone's, I think, comfortable with that.
Yeah. What would be some key tips you would give to candidates who are now in the situation that they are looking for the next step in their career, and then they have a chance to be interviewed over video? What should they pay attention to when they get in front of the camera with some decision makers on the other side?
Other than having their pants on?
That's generally a good idea, and hopefully, unlike me, check their sound works. But I would treat it like as you would a normal interview. Imagine you were face to face. In terms of presentation, how you want to convey yourself. Make sure your video is set up in a way that you're kind of filling the image with head and shoulders and chest. I mean, the same kind of ground rules, Sam, that you sent us for this, are all very relevant and apply. So, and it's obviously, it is harder because it's over screen, but you still want to try to create an engagement, as I say, just as if you were face to face. Use humor where it's appropriate, keep eye contact. Again, it's difficult with this format and cameras and eye lines and so forth, but try to practice. And Zoom with family, Zoom with friends, and practice it. Get comfortable with the technology, and talking to a little dot on the top of your laptop. I think, as I say, people are, it's easy to practice and to get used to it, but then the rest of it, treat it as though you were face to face. You can't be in your pajamas just because you're on video.
Yeah, those are very good tips. Absolutely. Now, I have noticed in here in Finland that we are seeing now managing directors of hotel companies are coming outside of the hotel industry. What are the attributes that you see that where the candidate can be very successful, whether they're coming from a retail chain and still have maybe the hospitality? But what are some attributes that you are looking at when you are looking at candidates for a company and they are coming out of not from the hotel industry itself?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it depends where they're coming from, but really what you're looking for is someone typically who's able to deal with, a customer-facing business where customer is king, customer is key, across multi-unit, most likely operations. So you've got, that scale and customer centricity together with, the all-round general management skill sets of strong stakeholder management. I mean, if you look at it these days, our business it's stakeholders. It's the owner of the property. It's the, depending on which side of the fence, table you're sitting on, but you've got owner, you've got management company, you've got employees, you've got guests, and it's maintaining those relationships. So I think those, that's where I would focus the key. And then, I think what our industry can benefit from through people like that is perhaps quicker adaptation or adoption of technology and innovation. Whereas an industry, we've maybe been a little slower than other industries. So I think that's one of the selling points for bringing somebody in from outside.
Yeah. But what I've learned is that there are certain people who are they're becoming, even though they're not in the hotel industry, but they are really becoming the brand ambassador for the hotel chain or hotel group, and it's just a matter that they understand now how with the digital era is that how important it is to come in front of people on the various platforms and all projects, because the customer want to know who is behind the brand and what do the brand stand for, and that's the ambassador's role to do it. And I think that's where we have something within our industry where we are used to the old way of face to face. We have things to learn about that aspect, and you think about the Virgin company and what people are doing, and all the Nordic Choice Hotels founder have been they are maybe flamboyant, but they also are projecting themselves and representing the brand. So that's one of the things that I admire in those people.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, the business has become asset light, and it's all about branding now on the operator brand side, and then you've got the flip side of that on the investment side. But it is a brand game now, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any further questions. We have a few questions from the viewers, but Abid, you have anything you'd like to further add from Chris?
Well, if it's okay, Sam, let's bring everybody back together, and we can continue to talk, and you can interject other questions as well. I guess I will throw this out, and Chris talked a little bit about the psychometric testing, as did Iñigo earlier. Talk specifically, and Iñigo, maybe I'll throw this over to you. How have you used psychometric testing in recruitment process? Does it really work, or is it all hocus pocus? If English is not my first language, half of the words that you're asking me to respond to, I might not even understand, but yet I'm going through the process. Talk a little bit about that as to how that has worked for you, Iñigo.
I will tell you my experience. I remember when Fernando joined N8, and you will remember Fernando, we had a discussion over this topic, and at that time I said, Fernando, I don't believe on psychometric. And he said, I firmly believe. And he was right, no? Later on, I realized that the good psychometric test really give the right value and give you a lot of information if the right people are able to manage and if you apply them to the right profiles. I think in our industry, we need to differentiate the recruitment depending on the type of profiles. In many roles, it's a matter of time to market. I mean, you place the job, and in 5 days, you need to have the candidate, okay? And there, you need to have the simplest model, okay? Including video and speed on those profiles is key. On other profiles, I think, obviously, there are many technologies and many sectors available, and there are some very good. Actually, I now that I'm convinced that they are good, sometimes I go myself through them, and then I realize that they really work. They're able to identify things that I recognize on myself. I don't know your opinion, Fernando. Do you remember this case?
Yes, I agree with you. Actually, I think that it should. We cannot forget that this is a tool. Yeah, but that this should be completely aligned to what we're really searching for and which kind of level. But I truly believe that it's much more useful when you have leaders that are prepared really to understand what you're searching for, what's the job description, and what's non-negotiable, what you're searching on the profile, and then to organize the proper cycle of interviews of the ones who should know that, who should select actually that person, not only the former boss and the HR representatives, but also the representatives from other areas that this person or this role is going to interact with. And then from that, to have a briefing session after for all of them together to discuss what it's the best candidate. I think that's the best to do. And of course, you have that the psychometric tools to use it as a support if the case that you use them.
Thank you for that. Chris, maybe I'll throw this question out to you. A lot of the leadership studies would say folks that can go with the gut, particularly in crises, are far more successful because you don't have the time to collect the data and be able to make the precise, educated decision. Isn't psychometric testing counter to that? Because psychometric results might tell you something totally opposite. For example, picking on my colleague here, Sam, it might show up that he is totally a lunatic, but I know he's a fabulous hotelier. I can vouch for that. How do you balance the two?
Well, I think it's, as Fernando says, it's a tool. It should be used as a data reference point among others. I wouldn't make a hiring decision, yes or no, just based purely on a psychometric assessment result. So you've got to put it into context. But I would say if, it's showing up that he's a lunatic and you're convinced he's not, it would at least give you a moment to pause and say, okay, well, maybe it's my thinking here, although that's my gut, is that what others maybe, compare that against what others are finding in their interactions with Sam and see, verify your gut. It would maybe give you a moment to pause and not just run away with your initial gut instincts. So it has can have a value there, but I do, wouldn't put 100%, reliance purely on the assessment. So it's a blend. You've got to mix these things up.
Fair enough. I think I'm going to start a movement that world leaders that occupy these very important offices go through psychometric testing, and the public should know what the results are. We might be able to make much better decisions as a result of that. Chris, back to you. There are lots of different things that are going on in this industry, with or without the crisis that we're dealing with. We have business models to live up to. There are different stakeholders. Of course, the talent piece and the guest service piece. Are we really asking way too much from our leaders, or are they able to deliver on all these things on the spectrum?
I don't think we're asking too much. I think it's part of running a business in this day and age. I think every business leader has multiple things to be dealing with. There's always new things coming up. As I say, right now, COVID is at risk of, it's dominating the news agenda, but there are other key initiatives for hospitality to be grappling with, sustainability and diversity and inclusion being two of them. Leaders need to resource themselves appropriately, surround themselves with the right people to tackle these issues. I don't think we're putting, you're not expecting superhuman effort or results from any particular leader, but they need to, as I say, build the right team, get the right experts around them, listen to them in order so they can make decisions and resource themselves appropriately. But I don't think we're expecting too much. It is the nature of the business these days.
Iñigo, dovetailing the requirements of the business and what we find out through some of the psychometric testings, and also during a person's working life, how can we better develop leaders? I might be more of an extrovert, whereas financial side of things breaks me into hives. I lead that to somebody else. Or I might be an introvert and you put me in front of public and I might totally freeze. How can the organizations develop our leaders to be all encompassing? Iñigo.
Okay, first I would like to say that Chris' job is one of the most difficult. I mean, recruiting executives, it's extremely difficult. Okay, if I look back my career and I look all the executives I've participated, if I had to give a number, I could say success rate of 55, 60%, not more, not more. Between those that don't work and those that are not as good as you expected, could be close to 55, 60. And we apply, as Fernando and Chris said, multiple tools, psychometric, we check references, competency-based interview, and the experience of all of us on the recruitment process. I think something key is the fit between people and company cultures. And this is a mistake I think many companies make. Many times we are fascinated by an amazing profile that doesn't fit in our culture. Okay, and that's something that we need to realize. And then it's very important to develop cultures that enable different kinds of profiles and different kinds of personality. And this is diversity. Okay, and there's not one leadership style that works. In many industries, we are very used to a very specific leadership style that many times comes from the CEO. I think the stronger companies are those companies where the culture is not the culture of the CEO. It goes beyond this. And I have such a strong culture where you can adapt to different personalities and you can get the best of the best talent. Okay, because there's not one leadership that works. And many times different profiles with different personalities get both amazing results. I know your experience with and Fernando, you have assessed and you have had conversation with many other executives.
I think that's a very good point, because there was a book published called The Team of Rivals. As a matter of fact, when President Obama was in the office, that was his favorite book. It was about Lincoln when he came in the office and how he brought totally different people that were diametrically opposed to how he thought and how he worked on his cabinet. And it was absolutely phenomenal. Being that we are human, we tend to rely more on like-minded people. We rely on people that we feel most comfortable with. So all these tools, I believe, would help us. I'm going to ask a question about performance appraisals. I know all organizations do it. It's almost a mandate, whether we do it once a year or once a quarter or whatever the case might be. Are the performance appraisals as they're being conducted today, are they still valuable? Should that still be done? And maybe I'll throw that out to you, Fernando, to respond to that, if you would, please.
That's a great question. In terms that I think that's a question we do every year, in a sense that either still valuable. Well, we continue doing it because they are still valuable. When we do it for the performance appraisal, that is quite usual in most of the companies. You do it also not only to value the how far you go in terms of your objectives and what you have aligned through the company and cascaded down, but also how you do it. I would say that that still is very valuable in the sense that we really take care and really pay attention to what it's important, how we do things linked to the culture, linked to the leadership profile, which are the competences that the leader will really measuring how well you do it, and that it really supports you to achieve the results. So in that sense, that keeps working on that as long as you develop and you make sure that on the leader's head, you really use that part to develop your own team members, and you don't really connect that with the money you will get at the end, with the variable you will receive at the end. That's one of the biggest issues we have in terms of the how. With the what, I would say with the objectives is just it's easier in terms as long as you clearly align the objectives across, and that when it's something that has to be adjusted or you have to adjust it in time in order to make it fair. That's also true. What I would say that makes it more valuable is when you really make calibrations across the year. When you really have calibrations previously with your team, your colleagues, in terms of the calibrations for the team, for instance, itself, in terms of performance, such as you will do with talent for the performance, that helps you a lot to really make alignment in terms of how fair it is, because that's one of the part of the aspects you have to consider, and that's important. And that really it's taken seriously in terms for the development and to really be progressing in terms for the employees themselves. Our main question has been for 2 years, should we disconnect already because it was working well, but is it the time to disconnect the what from the how? Because the how should have its own meaningful conversations on follow-ups and mid-year reviews, etc., to get and to focus on development, and disconnected from that. And our concern is that if we disconnect it, suddenly the attention is going to pay only on what I will get no matter what. And that's what we had to make sure that for the rest, that how is really taking into account on the rest of the processes, such as what we're doing for instance, with talent management. That's there, and that's part of the calibration we take place on how you do things. So as long as when it will come the time when we could realize that on the management committee and the next levels on leadership, that's clearly understood and that we can really trust that and that it will be respected, then we could think on disconnected.
Fair enough. Thank you for that. Sam, I will keep talking and talking and talking because this is a fabulous topic. Are there questions from audience or anything you would like to ask?
Well, I think we have some of our viewers, so thank you for that, Abid. I know you are passionate about this. There are a few viewers also who are passionate. And one of the questions that came up here, and I'll put it up here on the screen, says, this is Sam Björklund. He's based in Finland. How do you nurture passion? Is it through training or mentoring?
Let's throw that to Iñigo.
Iñigo, yeah.
Difficult question, eh? I think this industry, if you ask this question to any other industry, I think probably this is the industry where employees that work for hospitality have more passion for what they do. Okay, and I don't know if both Fernando and Chris agree on this, but my experience is that the best thing we have in this industry is the passion people have for their work. People really enjoy this. How do you do this? I could say it's because of the culture. I could say it's because of the training. I could say it's because of the leadership style, or it's a combination of all this. But the reality, okay, the reality is that if we look at this industry and many other industries, airline companies, retailers, come to hoteliers, and we've all had the people from these industries coming to learn from the customer programs and how we, because the reputation we have and how we measure quality and the passion for clients in this industry is something extremely remarkable. So probably it's a combination of all these things. But clearly, I think it's an industry that everybody looks at when it's about passion for service.
Just one more question from the viewers. How do you get information upward in the organization? That's the question.
How
we share the information upward the organization. We have different channels. I was mentioning to you, for instance, what we have for the COVID-19 channel that we will bring it across as a newsletter. We have also developed, we have our town halls that we organize accurately, and we organize it not only here, but also in the business unit. The managing directors, they organize their own town halls or their ad hoc meetings that they do it online. And it's quite easy because anyway, already we were prepared before the pandemic. We were already working with Teams. So it was quite easy. Everybody could connect. And for years, and Iñigo knows it because we started this together with the flexible work and the new way of working in 2015. So we were evolving with that. And then it was easier to move into a way where people would work at home. So in that sense, it was easy to connect with them and bring that along. And then from that on communication, what we have done also, it's that we make sure that that's what we support also from the management committee, and it happens on other management committees, that the key messages should be cascaded down. So for instance, in the management committee, I can tell from my team members that what we used to have is in the next day of the management committee, or we have our team meetings with our direct reports, so we cascade down the messages that we should cascade to make sure that this is going down through the business. And you can also complement it with bi-weekly or monthly meetings with the whole team to make sure that this information is broad.
Very good. What do you think, Abid? We have a few more questions before we wrap up. We've been hitting about 1.5 hours now.
Yeah, I think we've gone way over. One last question, if I may throw it out, and I would like everybody's opinion relative to that. Chris might briefly spoken to it, but Iñigo, starting with you, any advice for the future leaders of this industry? What could they be doing as we hear all the doom and gloom in the industry? Anything that is going on, it's enough to turn me off and find a job in a different industry. Any advice that you might have? Now, I'd like to add to that for those of the viewers of male gender, maybe growing a beard is a must because all of our panelists have a beard.
Yeah, definitely having a beard is a must. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I think that let me say, and I hope nobody gets offended, this industry traditionally has been quite endogamic. Okay, hotel schools, and I think we have an opportunity, same way people that go to hotel schools work in other industries, and we have very good examples I remember in the Netherlands, they all go to banking and to other industries that pay higher salaries. I think there's a clear trend of bringing talent from other industries, okay, and from other profiles, okay, not having the traditional profile that starts as a front office manager and then after 10 years becomes a general manager. I think that there's an opportunity and we have, or I, in my experience, have many good examples on this direction. I think also there's a very good opportunity of shifting people within the organization, okay, a much more functional mobility. I'm convinced, I'm my main experience HR, but I also oversee other areas. It's a matter of having the right people with the right teams and with the right culture, and then things work. So functional mobility is something that I think it's going to be a trend in the future in many companies.
Thank you, Iñigo. Chris, if you wouldn't mind adding to that, any advice for the future leaders in our industry?
Yeah, I think I'll come at this from the resilience angle, which is something I've been spending quite a bit of time on the last few months, and we've launched the Hospitality Resilience Series project as well. So my advice would be spend time knowing yourself, developing your own self-awareness and strengthening your own resilience. This won't be the last crisis we go through. And if anything, even before this, the concept of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity was ever present, whether you had a hotel in Hong Kong that was shut because of riots, or Paris, or volcano eruptions, or whatever. I mean, there's always something going on in our business. And I think leaders in hospitality need, tremendous amounts of resilience, and that will equip them well for the ongoing future. So work on themselves, and be strong.
Thank you for that. And last but not least, Fernando, anything you would like to add as to how the future leaders can prepare themselves?
Yeah, I would add to my colleagues that that you should have the passion. If you're going to become a leader managing a team, you really should have the passion for people. To join the hospitality, to discover you really have the passion for hospitality, that it really moves you inside. And also an advice I would say would be that to be open to all the possibilities and experience that could show up, that to be flexible for that. To be patient, but be patient with the right attitude, not be patient with the negative attitude. Be patient with the right attitude. To be brave and have the courage to assess the opportunities, to make decisions, but without neglecting to be humble. And very important as well, and especially in these current times, do not stop learning.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We always end our conversations on sharing something personal that you have learned during this pandemic when we've been all in a lockdown condition. And I'm going to start with you, Chris. Something that you can share that is uplifting, something that you have found out about yourself.
I have learned, it's a great question. I have learned how to take each day as it comes. Whereas before, my default was I was always worrying about what was coming and what was in the future, and am I prepared, and what's the danger coming down the road. And I've learned to become much more adjusted to the here and now and the present day, and focusing on what's in front of me at the moment.
Thank you for that. Fernando, yourself?
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar, because that's from the personal point of view. If you bring to the personal side, that's what has been what I have really experienced. It was really tough for me to realize, especially in the first months, that I couldn't control the middle term or whatever I was used to have, that I have it very clear. So for me, it was very frustrating. So I needed to learn to switch and see it from the daily based vision, and from the personal life and the professional life. And actually, it was as difficult in one and in the other, but that was the lesson I really learned.
Thank you for that. And Iñigo?
I would say two things. First, I'm really impressed with how the capacity we all have to learn this new way of working and to adapt to all this. I think this is something that shows that that human being is extremely resilient and able to adapt. And then from a much more personal perspective, I realized that I hate working full-time from home. I need to move. I need to see people. And this is good, this works, but I need to move. If my work, my entire life would be like this, I would quit and do something else. I hate working from home.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. Iñigo Capell, Fernando Córdova, and Chris Mumford. Fabulous conversation. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you to all of our viewers that joined us and all the insightful questions. Sam and I have been talking about making this platform available to those who have been negatively impacted and might have lost their jobs. We would like to make this platform available for an elevator pitch for senior level people, if they would like to come on this show and tell us about their background and what makes them a fabulous leader. It'll be a great study, more to come out on that. But thanks to everybody for joining us. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Abid. I'd like to also especially thank and give a shout out to the persons who have asked some question with their comments. Also, Paul Steen out of Orlando, Florida, and Sam Björklund from Finland, who has very nice. Sam Björklund gave a lot of nice questions here, which you can then view in the comments also. But I'd also like to thank all the live viewers who joined us from whether it was on YouTube or Hospitality Talks Facebook page or in LinkedIn. And then more importantly, if you didn't see this live and now you pressed the play button and you see it as a replay, as a recording. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us. If you're just in the start of the show, you will probably enjoy also towards the end. There's a lot of value that have been coming from Iñigo, Fernando, and Chris. So we really appreciate that. And please look out now in the future if we have some future exciting episode. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because that's the way you will find out when we are next live. So thank you again, and I'm just closing this episode for this time. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.